Hey there, hope you're doing well. Getting something published on the AWS API gateway takes a fair bit of wiring. So let's take a look at how we've published our APIs at Snowpal on AWS. Now, there's a number of pieces to this puzzle, so I'm going to try and quickly sort of recap to the extent possible in the next, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit lesser, and just see what items we can potentially cover. The idea here is to sort of get a sense of, hey, if I wanted to publish something on the API gateway on AWS, uh, how could I go about doing that? Now, there's a number of ways to skin the cat, which is sort of a true statement for for everything that we do, not just in engineering, but in every facet of life, right? So what we're going to see here is just one of the ways of doing it. What actually does work, right? One of the ways that does work because we have our APIs that are live, active, and in production. So while there might be other ways to do it, this is a way that has, I know we've tried a few different options before we got here. And this is an approach and a methodology and an architecture and a design that works well for us, right? We keep making changes and tweaking it. Fundamentally, things are just fine the way they are. So let's just take a quick look at it and see where we go. What I'm going to do here is probably going to do a screen share. I want to share my entire desktop like I do, which makes it actually easier. Okay, cool. So now that I'm doing that, I'm going to be switching windows back and forth. My apologies if that's a little bit distracting. But at the highest level, just to start. So if you go to aws.snowpal.com, you'll be redirected to the marketplace, to AWS Marketplace, and you'll see a list of our APIs here, right? We have a long list of APIs, and you can take a look at them. The idea behind us publishing these APIs is to expedite the development of mobile, web, and server-side applications for other consumers, other customers, essentially. So that way, if you have some money and as a team, maybe a backend team, or maybe you don't even have a backend team, you have a quick way to sort of realize your ideas and go to production, right? So it's essentially helping cut your time to market, because that's one of the biggest blockers, I would say, for people envisioning becoming entrepreneurs, right? How much money is going to take for me to build something? Whatever it's going to take you, how much ever money and skill and time and resources it's going to take you, our hope is by virtue of using our API is going to take you half of that, or perhaps less than half of that, right? That's the idea, and that's what we are seeing from from what we can tell by experience and feedback. So anyway, so let's say there is let's go with, it doesn't matter which API. I'm just going to pick project management because all of us understand that a little bit more. So if you go to project management API, and then you can go to view purchase options, you can look at the videos and stuff like that on AWS Marketplace, and you can look at the purchase options, and then you can hit subscribe here. Now, I'm not going to do that, but that's what you need to do. That's the same for every API here. You'll just go hit subscribe, and it becomes part of the consolidated billing, right? So it's very seamless to sort of consume, subscribe, subscribe and integrate essentially. Now you're able to subscribe to our APIs and pay by request, or pay by subscription, right? Like a monthly subscription or an annual subscription, or we work with customers to create customer offers as well, as supported by AWS Marketplace. But beyond all that, there are people, like, I'm sure if you're somebody who's thinking, you know what, I like this, but I want to be able to deploy this in my own infrastructure, we can help you do that. Or one step further, if you're like, you know what, we know how to do it, we know how to deploy APIs into our infrastructure, you just need to give us the license, right? Then you can just buy a commercial license for one API, multiple APIs, or all the APIs, and go about it, right? It's entirely up to you. So there's different models we engage in. So that's the high level overview of how, one of the initial starting points of how somebody would engage with us. So they would go to AWS Marketplace, click one of the APIs, hit subscribe, and then within the 2 minutes, it's done. But once they hit subscribe, here is what happens. Now, I'm not going to show production. It's just for obvious reasons, at least to the extent possible. So I'm going to show you the development environment to as much as I can. And when I need to piggyback on production, I'll just go there. So when you go to AWS Marketplace and hit subscribe, hit the button we just saw earlier, it's going to have you, let me make sure I am actually recording this. Yes, I am. We're 5 minutes in. Okay. That's not the right one. Okay. Oh, wait, hang on. Where was I? Was I here? I was here. Okay. Yep. So, oops. This is the product code that's here, blah, blah, blah. Yep. Okay. Let me lost my train of thought there. So what essentially we were talking about how to subscribe to the APIs, and once you do, it's going to tell you, AWS is going to tell you, hey, you know what, you've subscribed to it. Now go to the vendor's website or whatever the language is to actually complete the purchase process. And then there'll be a button that says go set up set up product. I think set up product is probably the verbiage, if memory serves me right. And when you do that, it's going to take you to a page that looks like this. Now it's going to be obviously the production page, not the development page, but it's going to look pretty identical to what you see here. So you'll enter your email, first name, last name, company name, phone number is optional, and then there's just a check to see if you're human, and then you hit register. And then if you have questions, you can book a meeting with us before you register as well. It'll tell you the name of the API that you're subscribing to based on the redirect coming from AWS Marketplace. And then you'll just enter this. As you can tell, it takes like less than 15 seconds to enter. And once you do that, you hit submit. You'll see a success modal. And then within the next 2 to 5 minutes from that point, 5 minutes is at the higher end, is more along the lower end of it is probably 2 minutes. But within that window of time, you're going to get an email from us, to the email address that you entered here with, a welcome message with 2 important pieces of information. One, it's going to tell you what your API key is, which is private, obviously, so don't share it with anybody. And then the next item is going to be the product code, because we have multiple APIs. So each API has its own product code. So the email will have 2 pieces of information. One is the API key, which you would use, or your dev team would use to build and integrate Snowpal APIs. 2 is the product code. So it's so we know which API it is that you actually subscribe to. That's all you essentially need. So once you get that, you can just go about it, right? Whether you can, again, the whole process between you selecting the API, clicking subscribe, and entering the details here and receiving the API key and product code by email, it's going to be 5 minutes tops. And then starting the 6th minute, your dev team can actually start integrating, right? It's as simple as that. I promise you, I'm not exaggerating here. And now if you want to go, before I forget, to the developers, the Snowpal developer documentation, you just go to developers.snowpal.com. There's you can look at, if you're a product manager, you're going to look at this documentation here. Again, all of the APIs, and there's a lot of examples and whatnot. I don't know how much we'll go into this, at least in the early part of this recording, but maybe we'll revisit this at a later point of time. So you can go here, look at all of the APIs, and then you can read about it and check out the API reference. You go to the API reference, you can see a long list of these endpoints, and you're good to go from there. Now, this documentation is something that we know product managers and owners appreciate. The developers like it too, but generally it's targeted towards the product owners, product managers, senior management and whatnot. But developers can benefit from this documentation as well, obviously. The reason I even mention that is because if you're a developer, you're most likely wanting to actually sort of look at Postman collections. So all of these APIs have a Postman collection as well, right? So it's building blocks API, project management API, and there's the list of APIs. For each of them, there is a Postman collection which you can clone or use either on the web directly through Postman or through a Postman client on your machine, right? So that's just from a documentation standpoint. Now, let's say you subscribe to it, you got the API key, and you're going to start doing it. Start building, integrating this API. Essentially, We'll get there and talk about what that entails. But I also want to sort of cover. Actually, you know what? Let's complete it. Complete the train of thought there, right? So once you get the API key, what you would do, you would actually go to, let's say you have, we have, this is again dev spaces, dev collections. You would, let's say you went to Postman and you're running it locally. You import the collection onto your native client, and then you start developing, integrating the API. So here is one of the endpoints. This is custom attribution API, and you can go look at it on the web or here just to see the list of endpoints. Let me actually do this as well. If you go to trysnowpal.com, and then if you go to the API, say project management, I'll tell you a little bit about it, and kind of tells you the size of that API, right? It's 250 endpoints. But hang on, were we looking at? I don't know, we were looking at maybe some other API here. Yeah, this is custom attribution. So let's just, the custom attribution API, this has like what, about 35 endpoints, right? So again, uh, the size of the API is driven by the number of endpoints, and if you looked at it in that sense, but it's more complicated than that, because some of these endpoints naturally are going to be a lot more powerful, or they bring a lot more features, or they're a lot more, they bring a lot more depth to your to the table than some others. What I mean by that is, if you have a sign up endpoint, it just supports a sign up, right? It's pretty straightforward, whereas there are endpoints that do like something, things that are extraordinarily complex behind the scenes, but they expose them in a very simple manner to you. So for somebody who's consuming it, all of the complexity is intentionally hidden from the developer or from the consumer of that particular endpoint. So we were just, let's go back here, and you can go to trysnowpal.com to check out the APIs, and read some more marketing related documentation about the APIs as well. Now if you come here, you got the API key. Let's take a simple endpoint, right? Register new user. Now you're using, you purchase, say, the custom attribution API or the project management API, doesn't matter. There are the majority of the endpoints that the API comprises of would be to serve the primary purpose of that API. So the access control API, and its purpose is to provide access control. The custom attribution API's purpose is to provide attribution support. But there'll be a small number of endpoints that are kind of similar across these APIs, which let you sort of onboard your users, your end users, to your system. Register a new user. Let's say you're building an app, I don't know, for the restaurant industry, and you want restaurant owners to onboard the API. You're going to implement some functionality whereby that restaurant, a bunch of restaurant owners or restaurant providers, or whatever the right term, restaurateurs, are your end users to your system, and you are building software to facilitate, to help the hotel and the hospitality industry. So long story short, all I'm trying to say is the new user here is essentially going to be your end user. So you're going to have a way for them to go sign up and whatnot, right? So you would use a sign up endpoint, and there's two things again: the API key and the product code. The API key is essentially what you got in the email. The product code is also what you got in the email. You put that here. So the two headers, the values you need to replace. The X API key, put the API key that you were sent to. The Snowpal product code would be the X Snowpal product code header, would be the product code for the API that you actually subscribe to. So you have those two headers included in your endpoints, and then you're good to go, right? And then if you go to the body, you see that this one has an email, password, and confirm password. So I won't go into the details of this. Now, this may or may not be the password that your end user signed up with. Now, most likely it would very well be that. So it's going to be a pass through. They enter the password. You don't have a backend system, or you have very little of it, if one at all, and you're leveraging our backend entirely to powering your systems. So you just do you pass through. You just pass the password that they entered, and then make this request. Or you could also do some sort of a mapping, meaning you get the password, you create the user sort of locally in your system, and then do a mapping to the integration that you're doing with these APIs. And that gets into the next level of complexity, because there are people who would be using more than one of our APIs, and we make things a bit more seamless, even more seamless to them, so they don't have to redo even some of the things that they would have had to do otherwise. I said a number of things there. If you've that's primarily for people using multiple APIs, more than one of our APIs, just to make their onboarding experience much simpler. Now, if you're just using one, forget everything I said before. So you could still choose to do the mapping, but to keep it simple, you use the password. You want to sign up using this endpoint. You create this body, the email, password, and confirm password. And once you sign up, you're going to get a response back that looks something along these lines. Again, this is all test, right? This is going to actually, that one is, let me go to local just to make sure. Yep, I don't hit something by mistake. Yep. These API keys are test keys for the lower environments, but regardless. So that's essentially what we did here. We used the API key and the product code that came in the email, and then started to test or integrate using the simplest of the endpoints, which is sign up, a simple body, email, password, and confirm password, and then we do a sign up. And what happens once this is, again, this is the end user, meaning not your end user. Like if you're subscribing the API to our API, you are our end user, and you have your own end users who, in this example, happen to be the hospitality industry, restaurateurs. But I'm talking about our end user, which is you. This is kind of how your development team's experience is going to look like. Now, once data is created, if you subscribe to our APIs either by through a pay per request or pay by subscription or custom offers, using our infrastructure on AWS Marketplace, our infrastructure, which is still on AWS and AWS Marketplace, then you would not have to worry about where this data is and how it's maintained. It's entirely up to us, right? It's sort of, it's a black box to you. We store the data as a SaaS provider, and you can fetch the data through some other endpoint, through the other endpoints that we support here. But if you are provisioning this in your own infrastructure, then you can point it to any database that you want to, like say any NoSQL or say a Mongo database, and then you would have complete control over your data, right? It's entirely up to you. Now, your database could be on AWS, or could be in a data center, or could be on some other provider like Google Cloud or Azure, right? Or Cosmos. Doesn't matter where it is. All that you have to do is you have to just point it to that particular database. That's sort of the basic experience of someone signing up, subscribing to it, on AWS Marketplace to one of our APIs, getting the API key and product code, and then importing the Postman collections, or using it on the web, or doing it natively like a lot of us developers do, and then consuming one of the endpoints by plugging in that header. Now, the rest of the endpoints, we won't go into the details in this video here, because then it becomes specific to the endpoints, and we're going to have a series of videos, quick 1-minute videos ideally, that speak to each of those endpoints. But here I just want to give you a quick overview of what that initial experience of subscribing to the API, getting the code, getting the email with those two pieces of information, and consuming that endpoint would actually end up looking like. Now, this is everything on the consumer side, which is you who's purchasing, subscribing to the API. We publish a couple more videos, maybe today, maybe in the coming week or so, that speaks to how some of this is done internally, right? Because there are people who are curious about the architecture and the design of how we got all of this working. Now, we might publish some of that or all of that as a free podcast, or as one of our courses on getsnowpal.com. I'm not sure. We'll see. But regardless, stay tuned, and we should have that to you in the near future. Now, let me go back here and stop sharing. And I think that's sort of the gist of what I wanted to. Let me center stage here. Yep. So that's the gist of what I want to cover in this video, as to hear what that basic experience is going to look like. Now, we have, again, not all, as you can imagine, our videos are videos related to this or anything else for that matter, are not mutually exclusive. So there is going to be some redundancy in these videos, because we have to sort of give context to somebody who's watching a video, because we cannot be presumptuous about the fact that they may or may not have watched some other video that also spoke to this. But the hope here is the redundancy is only just probably 5%, maybe 10% tops of the video, and everything else we talk about in each of these videos is collectively something that you can learn from uh, when you embark on the effort of integrating our APIs. That way, you can build your systems much sooner. I think that's basically it. I'm going to end the video here. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.